and principles of the CESA practice notes. It is highly recommended that any engineers wishing to advance their careers in the consulting engineering sector should consider registering for this program. For details of the BCE program and the many training courses offered by the SCE or the School of Consulting Engineering, you're requested to kindly click on the training heading on the CESA website, which is www.cesa.co.za. Now, reverting back to the MSDs, which is the topic of this webinar. As you will hear during the presentations, the MSDs were developed and introduced in December 2020, and the primary aim of this program was to assist or guide members to improve or manage their performance to international standards, as well as meeting the CESA mandatory requirements, and this is in the areas of quality, integrity, and sustainability management. This webinar follows an earlier MSD webinar in November 2021, and it's intended to provide members and those responsible for completing the MSDs with a broad understanding of and familiarity with the MSDs, which will make it easier to complete the MSDs, and they form part of the annual declaration pack that went out to members last month, so January. Members should note that in order to qualify for the annual CESA membership certificates, it is expected that they complete their annual declarations in full, including the MSDs and payment of their annual subscriptions. I would also like to inform you that the webinar is being recorded, and the presentations will be available on the CESA website after the webinar under the YouTube icon, and the link will be forwarded to delegates. Before we get started, I'd like to outline some of the house rules for our delegates or viewers. On the taskbar at the bottom of the screen, you will see the chat and the Q&A icons. Please use the chat for any comments you may have, and the Q&A for your questions, which we will address in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You're kindly requested to indicate which of the panelists you'd like to answer your question, although it's fairly obvious that if it's on a particular MSD, it will be for that presenter. To unpack today's topics, we're unfortunate to have 4 experts joining us. We'd like to thank them greatly for joining us. They will each deliver their presentations, and after the presentations, there will be the question and answer session, as I indicated earlier. Then the proceedings will end with some closing remarks, and I just want to remind the panelists that they've each been allocated 15 minutes for their presentations. The first panelist, happy to announce, will be Charles Saliers, who is a professional civil engineer and a technical director at member firm Jones & Wagner, and he is an active member of the CESA Quality, Risk and Sustainability Committee. Charles has been involved with the development of the MSDs from the beginning of the project, and he is well qualified to address us on this topic. And he will provide us with an overview of the CESA management system. So then you will see where the MSDs fit into the system. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Charles. It's over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Wally, for that very kind introduction. So as Wally has said, I'm going to be providing the overview. So I'm going to start with the contents of my presentation. So before we developed the MSDs, we had initial checklists, which were documents that were generated by CESA, and I'll go through these. The next stage in the development was identification of FIDIC guidelines, which I'll talk through, and then just basically describe how we got to the final MSDs from there. I'll show how to access the MSDs on the CESA website, and then just go through their structure. And then lastly, just touch on how we've optimized them since the first round, which went out in 2021. So the first document that was available on the CESA website or available from CESA was the Quality Management Implementation Guideline, or QMEG. So the purpose of this guideline was to verify that members have a system in place that manages the quality of their work. Similarly, there was a risk management implementation guideline, or RMIG, and that guideline was to assist members in managing risk, both at project level and in the business. Both of these documents, although different to the MSDs, have been updated and are currently on the CESA website in the member section. The third checklist at the time was the sustainability guideline and checklist. And this document was there to assist members with managing their projects and businesses in a sustainable way. And lastly, the business integrity management guideline, drafted in 2009, which was there to ensure members always act with integrity in their business. So at the time, the QMIG was based on FIDIC's interpretation of ISO 9001, but the 2008 version, and needed to be updated to the 2015 version, which was quite different from the 2008 version. CESA appointed an external consulting auditor to revise the checklist, but after this was reviewed by the QRS committee, they felt that the checklist was quite cumbersome. So we decided that it would need to be revised. At the same time, CESA identified that the industry requires member firms to ensure that they have not only a quality system, but also an integrity system and sustainability system. So then the QRS committee was tasked with identifying documents which we could use as current reference documents to update and draw up these management system declarations. So we reviewed the current FIDIC documents that are available, and we found the following for each of the three management systems. So for quality, we found the FIDIC guide to the interpretation and application of the 2015 version of ISO 9001. And for integrity, we found the FIDIC guidelines for integrity management in the consulting industry. And lastly, for sustainability, the FIDIC Project Sustainability Management Applications Manual, second edition 2013. So with these documents, we were able to draw up the declarations. So firstly, what we did for the quality MSD is we took that revised checklist that the auditor or the consulting auditor had updated. And with reference to the FIDIC guideline, we simplified that to a much more straightforward and less cumbersome declaration. For the integrity MSD, we developed from scratch a new document with reference to the FIDIC guideline, and similarly, the sustainability MSD. Once we had a draft version of these MSDs, we submitted them for circulation to the CESA QRS committee, and various members on the committee completed the checklists as if they were member firms and provided comments where we could optimize and update the checklists to be easier to use. We also drafted a guideline on completing the MSDs, which is available on the CESA website. CESA then appointed their website developer to convert the MSDs from being a paper-based system to an online system, which makes it much easier for members to fill out, on an annual basis. At the time that the declarations were completed, CESA decided to make the completion of the MSDs mandatory to address the need of confirming member management system status. The MSDs were linked to the annual declaration, which goes out at the beginning of each year. A requirement for providing evidence for the answers given in the MSDs allows for later verification by CESA to confirm members are doing what they say they are doing. And I think it'll be repeated a few times throughout the webinars today that this evidence doesn't need to be uploaded when doing your declarations, but needs to be available when and if the member firm is verified. So this results in assurance that CESA members have all three management systems in their company at varying levels of development. And we'll talk about that as we go. So let's just talk about how to access the MSDs. I think, quite a few members filled this in last year, and I'll show some stats later. But let's just do it for those that aren't aware. So if you hover to the CESA website, the member login is in the top right over there. It takes you to member login where you need a username and password. If you don't have these, you can contact CESA and they'll provide them. This takes you to the member section where there's a lot of good information only available to members, but specifically we're looking at the annual declaration. And after going through a few introduction and welcome pages, you will land up at your first MSD, which will look similar to what's shown on the screen. So I'm just going to go through these numbers. They talk to the structure of the MSD and provide some insights on how these are structured. So number one is the MSD question number. You'll see as we present each MSD in detail that they have varying numbers. Varying numbers of questions. Reference 2 and 3 there, those are the paragraph references in the FIDIC document. So if you need more information on what that question involves, then you can always source the FIDIC documents from CESA and look up some more information on that specific question. Then number 4 is the MSD question and additional information. So the text in italics under the main question provides more insight to assist the member in answering the question. Then with reference to number 5, that's where you place your yes, no, or not applicable answer. Number 6, if yes, state what documents you have which shows can be used as evidence that your company meets that requirement. And then 7, if not applicable, provide justification. So as I've said earlier, there's no need to upload documents as you fill these out. And something else that's important to indicate is that you don't have to score 100% when you fill out these MSDs. The purpose of them is to show that there are management systems in place. Yes, they will be at varying different levels of development, but the purpose is to show improvement from one year to the next. So for this reason, what we've done is we've programmed in to keep the answers from the declarations of 2022, and then you'll only need to make changes to where your answers need to be updated, where your policies have been updated. So then just going on to the optimization. So the first round of MSDs was completed in 2021. So this was a new requirement, and I think CESA members were still getting to grasp on what the requirements were, and only less than 20% of members finalized and submitted their MSDs. But running this was a very good exercise. We got good feedback from members, and in particular, we found somebody to join us on our team to develop the sustainability MSD going forward. So that was very useful. The second round of MSDs was completed last year. The percentage of members who completed significantly increased, which is great to see, and we're hoping for a higher percentage this year. In terms of verification, a pilot verification process was carried out last year in which 2 member firms were verified. The verification occurs on the same online system. So once your company has been selected for verification, essentially on the day we log into exactly where you filled out your MSDs. There'll be 2 additional columns for us, which will then allow us to state yes, verified, or no, or a place to insert comments. So once this process has been completed at the verification, we essentially close off and sign off, and the report is then automatically generated after the review. And then after being approved by CESA, is sent to the member, confirming their verified MSD score. So that's the overview. Wally, I believe I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you, Charles. I was so interested, I lost my place. Okay. The second, let me just say thank you, Charles, for so ably presenting on this topic and providing us with an overview of the framework and understanding of the CESA management system, which encompasses the 3 MSDs. And as previously mentioned, presentation will be available on the CESA website. As an aside, I'd like to inform delegates that as a benefit of membership, CESA tries hard to empower members with useful information and through webinars such as this one. Our second panelist will be Diane Liebenberg, who's a professional structural engineer. She's a member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Committee and a lecturer at the CESA School of Consulting Engineering. Diane is passionate about quality management and has her own consulting practice in quality management, mainly advising consulting engineers on how to obtain their ISO 9001 certification. Diane is currently the chairperson of the subcommittee that manages the development and implementation of the MSDs, and as a matter of interest, the other 3 panelists this morning or this afternoon are also members of this CESA subcommittee. Diane is going to address us on the Quality Management System Declaration, also known as the QMS MSD. Diane was generally involved in the development of the MSDs, but was largely responsible for the development of the Quality MSD. As Diane lectures and consults in quality management systems, there's no better placed person to address us on this topic. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Diane. So it's over to you, Diane.
Great, thanks, Wally, and thanks for that lovely introduction. And just a general welcome to everyone who's joined the webinar. As Wally has said today, I'll be focusing mainly on the Quality Management System Declaration. Charles has already given you a very broad overview of the MSD, so I'm going to delve specifically into what is required with your quality system. So just to give you a quick sort of overview of what we're going to touch on today, I'm first going to go through the FIDIC requirements to look at the FIDIC documents that are available for your quality MSD, as well as other documents that CESA has available. We're just going to touch on ISO 9001 certification and what that means to completing your MSD. I'm then going to broadly run through the sections of the quality MSD, and that basically we've divided it up into 4 sections. The first section talks to business strategy, leadership and planning. The second talks to the project delivery stages, and we based that on the ICSA delivery stages, so it's the stages 1 to 6. The third section looks at our support services, so everyone that supports project delivery. And the fourth one looks at your performance evaluation, analyzing data and improving your system as you go along. And then just to round off the presentation, I'll just touch on the benefits of implementing an effective quality management system. Right, so as Charles mentioned, all the MSDs are based on FIDIC guidelines. So the quality MSD is based on 2 FIDIC guidelines. The first one is the FIDIC Guide to Quality Management in the consulting engineering industry. And the objective of this guideline is basically to provide an introduction and background information on quality systems. And it also actually showcases the benefits of implementing such a system. So it outlines what constitutes a quality system with specific focus on consulting engineering firms. So the guideline gives you very practical guidance on how to initiate the development of a system, specifically, again, focusing on a consulting engineering environment. The second guideline is basically the FIDIC Guide to the Interpretation and Application of the ISO 9001, the 2015 standard for consulting engineering industry. So this guideline basically focuses purely on your ISO 9001 standard. And it gives you some very good indication on how to interpret the requirements of the standard and specifically how to implement them within a consulting engineering firm. So it's very beneficial. It looks at ISO from a sort of a consulting engineering perspective. The other documentation which CESA does have available is the QMEG, which Charles mentioned, which is the Quality Management Implementation Guideline. And there are also a variety of practice notes that you can find on the CESA website. And just a note, I think Charles did mention it as well. As a member firm, these are available to you at no additional cost. In addition to these guidance documents, CESA also has numerous training programs that are presented by the School of Consulting Engineers. I present a very detailed course on the implementation of quality and risk management in your business and project delivery. So please feel free to contact the school and find out more information on the courses that they actually do present. Right, so just to get started, I first want to touch on what ISO 9001 certification means to when you are completing your MSD. So if your organization has developed a system which complies to the ISO 9001 standard and to which you are certified, you are not required to complete the questions of the quality MSD. But you are, however, required to provide certain information regarding your certification. So what we're looking for there is just the name of your certification body, your certification, your certificate registration number, the validity date, as well as your date of first certification. So if you are not certified to ISO 9001, or if your certificate has expired, then you are required to complete the 38 questions contained within the MSD. For the other MSDs, namely the integrity and project sustainability, you are requested to submit details of certification that may pertain to these management systems. But unlike the quality MSD, you're still required to complete all the questions. But I'm sure Philip and Sonia will go into this in a bit more detail in their presentations. And then just a note from my side, the completion of the quality MSD doesn't mean that you're ready for ISO certification. It basically means that you've addressed some of the requirements. So ISO 9001 has approximately 64 clauses containing requirements that you need to comply to. And our MSD basically only asks for about 38 requirements. Okay, so then I'm just basically going to go through the main sections of the MSD just to give you a bit of background so you know what to expect, what you should be looking for, how you should be answering the questions. So the first section of the MSD deals basically with management. And in 9 questions, it will request you to provide evidence that management has brought into your system and constantly drives the system. So from our point of view, this is very important because we basically see it time and again, if the managers aren't leading by example or not committed to the system, then the quality system doesn't function as effectively as it should. So in this section, we ask about your business strategy or plan, and if your plan identifies internal and external issues that can basically impact on your organization. We also look at your documentation requirements. So you are required to define all the processes within your organization. You need to have a documented scope, a quality policy. And also what's very important is to have objectives because your objectives will help you to measure and help you achieve your strategy and your plan. And then we go on just to look at staff requirements. And what's very important is communicating requirements of the quality system to your staff. So the MSD will require that you train your staff on the quality system, and very importantly, that you assign roles and responsibilities throughout the organization, and also that these have been communicated to your staff members. And then lastly, but definitely not least, is you will need to demonstrate that you have identified risk and opportunity within your organization. And this is not just relating to your projects. You need to look at your entire business and see how do risk and opportunity impact on your business. And as well as what you'll need to do then is to basically identify actions to address those risks and opportunities. Then the second section of the MSD deals with project delivery. So this delves into your project delivery stages. And in 14 questions, we try to encourage you to demonstrate how you are implementing your quality into your basically your day-to-day work on project delivery. So during stage 1, inception, here it's very important to ensure that all project requirements are identified and formally documented. So this you can do through a contract, a proposal, a bid, a tender, however you want to do it, but somewhere you need to document your project requirements. And for stages 2 and 3, these focus purely on design. And here what's very important is to plan your project. So have a project plan in place, know how you're going to deliver your project, what are the milestones, who's working on the project, look at what your risks and opportunities are on the project. So the planning on the project is a big point and a big focus for your quality management system. And the second big part in your stages 2 and 3 is reviews. So everything that you do, you need to review. Inputs that you are receiving, you need to review those for adequacy. And we basically say you don't need to approve the inputs, but you do need to review them to see are they adequate for you to use going forward in your designs. And then I cannot stress this enough, is to check, and check again. You must have evidence of all your reviews, your verifications, and your validations. And, you can be really creative in this regard. You can redline documents, you can implement track changes on reports, you can insert comments onto PDF documents, but just make sure that as you are reviewing and checking that you're retaining evidence of all those reviews. And then last, just in the design stages, is just to make sure that you manage change. So look at implementing change registers. Maybe keep separate change approval records. Just have evidence that you are assessing the impact of change and how you manage that change. Then stage 4 basically looks at your documentation and procurement. And here we focus a lot on the ability to demonstrate evidence of approval prior to release. So this is anything that's leaving your organization that you're issuing. You must be able to show evidence of who authorized that document to be released to a third party. And then naturally, as we are issuing to third parties, we need to make sure that we keep transmittal records of what we've issued. And again, here, be creative. Think of what is the easiest way to demonstrate that you are actually delivering your information to the third party. Stage 5 talks to construction. And here what's very important is records. Make sure that you have records of everything that you do on site. So it's inspections, it's monitoring, it's diaries, it's test results. And I think what's very important here as well is just to make sure that copies of those records are actually copied back to your office. A lot of consultants leave records on site and then they don't have control over those records. And then lastly, on site, if you are making use of measuring devices, please make sure that those are controlled, that you have evidence of calibration. And then finally, stage 6 is our closeout. Ensure that you close out your project correctly. This is generally the stage that we like to skip and we just want to move on to the next project. But make sure that all project requirements have been met, and very importantly, get feedback from your clients and interested parties, because this is definitely going to help you going forward in improving your system. Right, so then the third section of the MSD is basically your support services, and here we target 11 questions. The first set of questions deals with human resources. So we just basically explore to see if staff are competent, and if required, do you need to take additional actions in order to increase the competency? And that could be through training or mentoring or any similar action. The second part of support services looks at your financial management. So this basically, the MSD just looks at how you maintain your financial records, how you retain those records. The third portion is supply chain management. And this is quite important. And what the MSD does is just to explore how you control your outsourced activities, as well as evaluating and reevaluating your suppliers. The fourth part of support services talks to organizational knowledge. So Are you gathering libraries together? Are you making information available to staff so that they can actually conduct their work? The fifth part of support services is infrastructure management. So this basically ensures that you control and maintain all your buildings, associated facilities, any equipment, transportation services that you might have or that you provide to your staff, just to ensure that they have the correct tools and environment to do their work. And the last one of support services, but probably one of the most important, is your documented information. So ensure that you are storing and protecting your documents, make sure that they're very easily retrievable, and then naturally use templates and standards throughout your organization. And this just ensures the consistency in the production of your documentation. And then basically our last section of the MSD is performance evaluation. And performance evaluation just ensures that your organization is going to strive to continually improve. So what the organization needs to do here is to identify data that it will collect, and then to analyze that data, and that data should demonstrate how is the organization performing. Client feedback is a crucial type of data that we can collect and analyze. And then also under this section, you need to make sure that you are conducting audits of your systems and that non-conformances are being identified and addressed. And this naturally leads to improvement of your system overall. Right, and then just to quickly touch on why do we need quality and what are the benefits of implementing a quality system. So for me, I always say the two biggest reasons as to why we need quality is that firstly, it's going to prevent things from going wrong. And when things do go wrong, the second part is that it's going to protect you against claims or challenges that might come in. So in order to prevent things from going on, you must have an effective system. The system must be embraced throughout the organization. Like I've said, if your leaders don't buy in, your system will fall by the wayside. But sometimes, we can have an effective system in place, but things can still go wrong. Things slip through the cracks. We're all human, we do make mistakes. But it's then that the evidence or the records that are required by your quality system will protect you. And unfortunately, it is only when things do go wrong that most organizations see the benefits of implementing a quality system and ultimately see the value of producing comprehensive and accurate records. So those for me are the two biggest sort of prompts to have an effective quality system. But what quality systems also do, they allow you to enhance your reputation. They allow you to win more work, maybe win more tenders. Like I've said, reduce risk and errors, and eventually in the long run, they will save you money. You'll become more efficient, more effective, and that will reduce your overall costs within your organization. And that's basically me done on the quality management. But just two things, sorry, Wally, I have to stress these for the guys that Charles has mentioned, but I need to say them as well. The MSDs are not there to catch you out. It's more of a guide on how to implement effective systems. So like Charles says, you don't have to score 100%. You don't have to answer all the questions. CESA just wants to see that you are starting to implement systems, and they want to start measuring to see that you are improving your systems. And also the other thing that Charles did mention is you do not need to submit evidence. So don't think you have to upload all the evidence. You just need to state what the evidence is. And then if you are selected for a review, or if you would like CESA to review your MSD, that's when we have our online meetings with you and we will review the evidence there. So yeah, so I think that's me now done. So I wish everyone good luck in their implementing their quality systems and completing their MSDs. If you need any help, please reach out to Wally. He'll share our contact details with you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining, and we will be available for questions afterwards. Thanks, Wally. It's back to you.
Thank you, Diane, for that very eloquent presentation. But I think particularly for giving us really valuable guidelines and practical pointers on the quality MSD, which I found very enlightening. And I'm sure it's going to be of great value to the members completing this MSD. And just a reminder to our viewers or members and delegates that Diane's presentation will be uploaded to the CESA website after this. Our next panelist is Philip Owens, who is a professional civil engineer, and he is an active member as well of the CESA Quality, Risk and Sustainability Management Committee. He is a director of the SCIP SCIP Engineering Group, which is a CESA member firm, and he is also secretary of the Gauteng CESA branch. Philip will address us on the FIDIC Integrity Management System Declaration, also known as the FIMS, FIMS, MSD. With his over 25 years experience in the industry, Philip is well qualified to address us on this topic. So I'd like to hand over to Philip. It's over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Wally, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the part of my presentation. As Wally said, I will be presenting the FIMS, or in full FIDIC Integrity Management System, part of the MSD declaration. And I will briefly run through this. As you will see, the questions will be fairly self-explanatory, and then you go through the yes, no, not applicable answers, and that should give you good guidance in completing your MSD. Now I must just go to the next slide. The overview of my presentation would be as follows. I will briefly touch, similar to Diane, on the guidelines on which the FIMS were based, and it, as mentioned, it's the FIDIC documents, which comes in two parts, two different hard copies. I will touch later in the presentation on how to get your hands on those documents. Part 1 deals with the policies and principles. Part 2 of the FIDIC document deals with the procedures. They've got very good example documents in there that will also give you good starting point to develop your own documents. Then I will briefly touch on the MSDs, and the sections are broken up into three parts. The first part dealing with the strategy, the planning and the leadership of your company, the integrity management, project delivery in the second section, and in the third section, you look more at the evaluation of the performance of your system. And then right at the end, I'm going to touch on possible benefits of implementing a FIMS system in your company. There you can see the two documents, the two FIDIC documents that were used as the framework of our FIMS MSD. Part 1, as I mentioned, covers the policies and principles, and it describes in more detail the integrity management system. Part 2 covers the procedures, and it also assists you in developing your own system. And both documents in the annexures have different example documents, different forms that you can adopt for your own company. You can also see on the screen the links directly to the FIDIC bookstore, where you can online order your copies of the documents, hard copies of the documents. You can also contact CESA directly to order the documents through CESA. That would take a couple of weeks to get into South Africa, because we will also be ordering it online, but you will get your copy, and it does make for riveting reading in developing your FIMS MSD. Part 1 of the FIDIC document, which deals with the policies and the principles, really have two main objectives. The first objective gives you background on why would you want to implement FIMS in your company and what it should include to be effective. The second objective is the typical things that all member firms should include in their FIMS, regardless of your size, where you do business, even the type of business, if it's where you run your projects. It doesn't really matter. There's a sort of a minimum guideline on what you need to cover. That is the index of the document. I've screenshotted there for you. As you can see, all the various sections, and there's some good background and interesting reading. But what I would like to draw your attention to would be Appendix B of Part 1, that gives you a code of conduct for consulting firms, which will assist you in developing your firms. Then Part 2, where it goes more into the detail of the procedures, gives you, again, there's two main objectives in the document, and it really shows what sort of compliance practices do you need to implement. And a lot of this is based on trends that was developed internationally in dealing with all the various anti-corruption legislation that came out throughout the globe, and it's really based on best practice. And then the second one is describing on how do you go about designing and then implementing your firms in your practice, and then also the various procedures. Again, like Part 1, I've given you a screenshot of what the document covers, and again highlighting the two appendixes where there's again a code of conduct, which is the similar one that's coming from Part 1. And then also in Part B, there's various sample forms that you could also use and adopt and create your own firms. Some background, which I found jaw-dropping when I was researching and preparing, is that the World Bank puts the bribes paid annually at approximately 5% of GDP, which is quite a staggering number with so many zeros there. And FIDIC decided to use integrity management instead of anti-corruption, because integrity management comes from the side of the, we would almost say, the bribe giver, and it deals with the supply side corruption. And it assists in our member firms rather focusing on ethical behavior. And that is more proactive than dealing with just straightforward anti-corruption, which got a little bit more negative, and it also shows a defensive action on our part. So there's an opportunity for us to act more with integrity, and then also that brings a much more higher standard of for our industry and our member firms. And then also out to the public, it just shows that we act with integrity. The document, your firms would then basically be made up of two main policy portions, showed there on the screen. It would be the code of conduct that forms sort of the heart of the firms, and then that is supported with your various policies, and the combination of the two then gives you your firm's framework. And I again just reference the Appendix A there from Part 2 that gives you an example code of conduct that you can use as a starting point. The MSD contains 17 questions, and as Diane and Charles already mentioned, you've got an option when you deal with the putting in the MSD with either a yes or no answer. If yes, it requires evidence, but as we've mentioned, you don't need to upload any documents as yet, because that will only be required if you are selected for verification or if you volunteer to be verified by CESA. Then if you obviously mark a question as not applicable, then you would just put some justification to that answer. The MSD consists of the three main sections. There's 7 questions under the business strategy. There's 6 questions under the project delivery of the integrity management. And then lastly, 4 questions in how to evaluate the performance of your system. Then one of the benefits of implementing the firms, if you would like to go in that direction, there's Part 3 of the FIDIC document that is available as a free download. I've placed a link at the bottom of the slide there from the FIDIC website. And Part 3 really shows how firms can fit into ISO 37001, and then you could get your certification in terms of the anti-bribery framework of that said ISO standard. A further benefit, if you are playing in those types of projects, would be the large internationally funded projects, for example, by the World Bank. They have an agreement between these 5 financial institutions that if you're not able to prove that you are registered, or if you've got a robust firms in place, that you will not be able to participate in these funded projects. And as you can see, that agreement amongst these financiers were already in place in 2010. And that would be my presentation. I thank everybody for listening, and Wally, back to you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for that, for providing us and those who will be completing this MSD with valuable insights into and an understanding of the MSD. Just a reminder for anyone wishing to visit Philip's or revisit Philip's presentation, that it will be available on the CESA website after the webinar. Our final panelist will be Sonia de Klerk, who is an internationally recognized expert and a seasoned practitioner in the field of sustainability. Sonia is an active member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Management Committee, and she also occupies the position of lead in terms of quality, environment, and sustainability at Zutari, which, as we all know, is a CESA member firm. Sonia will address us on the Project Sustainability Management System Declaration, also called the PSM MSD. Sonia has contributed greatly to the development of this particular MSD, and she is very well qualified to address us on this topic. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to you, Sonia. It's over to you.
Hey, thanks very much, Wally, for the kind words, and welcome to everybody on the call. So I will be speaking about the Management System Declaration for Project Sustainability Management. And I think to quite a few on the call, this might be a fairly new concept, much more new than, for example, the well-established ISO 9001 standard quality management system that Diane covered. So I will first of all provide you with a definition of what sustainability is and at the same time what it is not. Introduce you to some documentation from FIDIC that can help you understand this concept of project sustainability better. Then we're going to delve into the actual MSD, the questions that you can expect, certifications that you can get, and then lastly also the benefits of having a project sustainability management system, because it's definitely not the intent that we just add red tape for you when you complete the declarations, but that we also enable your business to grow and to improve processes. So when we look at the definition of sustainability, that was actually already put in place in 1987 by a commission called the Brundtland Commission. And what they said is that sustainability means meeting the needs of the present, like our current generation, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And sustainability has 3 components. It could be social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability. So, for example, environmental sustainability, if we damage the environment, then future generations will, for example, suffer water shortages, climate change, etc. If the social cohesion of a society is damaged, again, future generations will be exposed to that. The economic category sometimes causes a bit of confusion, because what is not meant as the turnover, the revenue, the profit of your company. Economic means, for example, job creation in communities through our projects, the opening up of a transport corridor that then triggers economic development in a region. So when you see questions about economic sustainability, we don't want to know your turnover, we don't want to know your profit margins. Another common myth is that sustainability and environmental care are more or less interchangeable. And that's also not the case. As you would have seen, it is more complex. It caters for social, environmental, economic factors. Now, you have to differentiate between sustainability practices that you might have within your organization. So for example, you might have recycling programs, you might have CSR programs, make donations, support welfare organizations. But what we're really looking at is what happens on your projects. If we genuine consulting engineering isn't really a high impact industry internally. It's not like we have a lot of emissions coming out of our facilities, etc. I mean, we generally office-based or site-based. We use paper, we print, we use electricity. Where we have the real impact, and if we're serious about making an impact out there, then we need to say what happens on our projects, because every little design change that you make that you can motivate with your clients can actually, on a much larger scale, prevent emissions, stimulate economic development, and so on. Sometimes you hear people talking about PSM and PSM2, and that's a little bit confusing. What is that actually? So PSM2 is actually the abbreviation for the FIDIC Guide to Project Sustainability Management in the second edition. There was a previous edition, I think it was about 2008 that came out. This is the 2013 edition. And that is very interesting to read. So it provides you a background on what is project sustainability actually, what are the benefits, the steps that you can follow along the execution of your opportunities, proposals throughout the development of your projects. And this is really what the CESA declaration is built on. So first of all, it gives you an opportunity to declare, do you have a project sustainability management system in place? But also use that MSD to get guidance of what would be a well-rounded system. So what would other companies do to demonstrate that they address sustainability in their projects? It's a fairly short one. There are 9 questions you can answer with yes or no. And again, as Charles already said in the beginning, you're not required to submit evidence of everything you do. If you are comfortable that you would be able in a verification situation to show to us that you've got a process in place, that you follow something that is acceptable. If you say something is not applicable, we ask you to provide a justification, and that can sometimes be the case. So if you, for example, typically only get involved in the design phase of projects, and you typically do not get involved in construction monitoring, then the questions that relate more to the actual creation of an asset might not be applicable to you fully. So then you can just explain this. Looking at the questions, so we start with questions about your certifications, and it's a little bit more complex in the sustainability space because there is no single one possible certification. In quality management, as Diane also explained, you have got ISO 9001, and that's the one. In the sustainability space, there is a range of certifications that you could mention. So some of you might be ISO 14001 certified. So that's a sort of ISO 9001 style standard dealing with environmental management. Some of you who calculate your carbon footprint might also use the 14064 standard. So that's a standard that describes exactly how do you do those carbon footprint calculations. Some of you might be familiar with the standard about social responsibility. Health and safety is also relevant in the context of sustainability, because on the one hand, it addresses how do you keep your staff safe. It can also address how do you keep your assets safe for end users, for contractors. And then also bribery and corruption, and that was also covered already, is also part of this whole suite of sustainability. Just imagine corruption, anti-bribery. It does, as we unfortunately sometimes see, it does erode the social context and cohesion of a society. Then we have a variety of standards that is not ISO standard. Some of you might be familiar with the Global Reporting Initiative. That's one of the leading frameworks in the world on how you create a sustainability report. You can't get certified to it, but you can, for example, self-declare that when you do a sustainability report that you apply the GRI standard. You have the United Nations Global Compact, so your company might be a participant or a signatory of it. You might participate in the carbon disclosure projects, in science-based targets, which again is something that targets specifically greenhouse gas emissions or the greenhouse gas protocols. So the answer that you can give there about what are your certifications, you can refer to any of these. You might say we're not certified, but we do have a system that aligns to 14001, or yes, we are certified, we do have a certificate. But you can also say, for example, we follow the Global Reporting Initiative process for sustainability management and so on. If you've got questions, if you're not sure, I'm more than happy for Wally to share my contact details. Ask me anytime. That's something I'm very passionate about, and I'll gladly help. Then we go into the main section of the declaration. And sustainability starts really at the top. If top management is not committed to have an environmental strategy and ethics strategy, if it's just sort of expected to happen by itself, it probably won't. So for example, as your leadership set objectives and targets for environment, you might, for example, not have a recycling program yet, but you will implement one, or you might not have a process yet to address environmental performance during your project planning stage, but you're on it, you will implement it. So we really want to see strong leadership engagement, that they give the overall direction and guidance to the business to implement project sustainability management. The later questions, so 6 questions, look then more into the detail of what actually happens as you go through your projects. At the project inception stage, at the concept viability stage, then while the design is developed, while you are under while you're developing construction procurement documentation, while the project's out for construction, and then what happens at project close. And like I said earlier, so there, if your company typically does not do construction procurement documentation, or does typically not do construction monitoring, site supervision, and then you may explain that that is not the case, and question 4 and 5 might not fully apply to you. Now, these stages and these questions really mimic where we have got the biggest influence. I said, you know, if we want to make a difference as an industry, then yes, by all means do internal recycling, etc. But look at your projects. That's where you can make a big difference. And the earlier you start, the bigger the impact that you can have. Because if you are at concept stage, if you're still engaging with your client, the ability, for example, to influence a design is the biggest. If it's out on construction already, there isn't so much you can do about, for example, the north-south orientation of a building, or the avoidance of sensitive areas, etc. So use those opportunities. Now, we totally appreciate that some clients are very committed about sustainability. They will get it. They will listen to your advice. Other clients might say, well, we want just a point on price, and we hear your advice, but sorry, we can't afford it. We don't have it. So what we're saying is, think about the influence that you have at the different stages of your project, and wherever possible, use your influence. That's actually, in my view, what good engineering in this day and age means. Now, I've spoken about what would be the benefit, or can I say, to the planet, to society, of you having a project sustainability management system. Now you might say, but what's in it for me? What's in it for my company? And there are definitely benefits for you. One is you will future-proof your business. We can definitely see that the whole discourse about sustainability, about climate change, about environmental protection has changed. And the client expectations are changing in line with that. You also need to think about climate resilience. So when we do a design, other than we want to save emissions, we want to prevent pollution, etc., we need to factor into our designs that wind speeds have changed, that sea levels are rising. So we can't really just go back to empirical information from way back when we do designs. We have to factor in what might happen in future. It will probably help you to win more work, and more so supposedly with some client segments than others. If you're involved in the tendering processes, if you're involved responding to tenders, you'll probably see that more and more clients ask sustainability and environmentally related questions. It can lead to cost reductions, well, for you, because you're saving resources, but it can also in the longer term lead to cost reductions for your clients. If they're operating an asset over a 20-year horizon, then yes, the initial cost might have been higher, but they will reap the benefit, let's say, after year 5. And again, that is something that you can sell to them and make them aware. Sustainability advice, sustainable buildings is also an emerging market. I mean, I'm sure you are all familiar, green buildings, Green Star rating, but then other than moving into office buildings, it started moving into industrial facilities, it started moving into roads and infrastructure. So think about, for your own benefit, which market opportunities can you unlock by actually building sustainability into your projects. Project preservation, that could just be that, as I said already, your assets that you designed will withstand different wind speeds, etc., etc. It can also be that the communities which are part of your project universe are involved, feel they are being cared for. And we know if a community does not feel included and if they feel they've been overlooked, it can also have very negative repercussions for projects. It can give you a competitive advantage. There's a lot of research happening, for example, in terms of sustainable concretes, in terms of sustainable road surfacing, etc. So it can really, being at the cutting edge of those sort of technologies, can help you. It can help you avoid resource mismanagement. It increases your organizational value. It might help you also internally to retain staff, to make your staff feel more committed, more appreciated. I see it a lot. I work a lot with our younger engineers, and they've got very strong sentiments about sustainability. It stimulates innovation. If we think about when I was young and I started in the industry, what was possible then as opposed to what is possible now. Think about even, for example, benefits of building engineering models, of virtual, of digital twins of assets that you can use to actually improve the sustainability performance of those assets. Collaborate with stakeholders via digital twins, etc. So there is a lot of innovation happening in the sustainability space that you can actually use to bring your own organizations forward. So that brings me to the end of my short slot, and I hope you now have a better understanding of the actual declaration of the questions you have to expect, but I will also inspire you a little bit to see sustainability not as something like a grudge purchase that you have to do just for the sake of filling in your declaration, but that it is really something, if you embed it into the DNA of your organizations, can really help you be future ready. So thanks very much.
I'd like to thank you, Sonia, for that I think, very valuable presentation on a topic that many of us find difficult to understand and implement. And your passion for the topic showed clearly, and thanks for that. Your presentation will be uploaded to the CESA website, and it's going to be invaluable, I think, for members to access it as they go about completing the project sustainability MSD. So thank you very much, Sonia.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to pose the questions submitted by the delegates to the panelists, and we've also got some we'd also like to present to the panelists. So I'm just going to allocate them. We have time, so if anyone else wants to add a question, please feel free. Okay, the first question, which I'm not sure who to address it to, I think maybe Philip. Is it compulsory to have an integrity management system, policy in place? So it's over to you, Philip. Yeah.
Thank you, Wally. Thank you for the question. And the short answer is yes, you will require policy. Otherwise, you won't know sort of what your own rules to implement the FIMS in your company. But before I go into the detail of that, we must maybe reverse back to Charles' presentation, where the decision was made by CESA to make the MSDs, all three of them, compulsory for membership. And then I would like to just share my screen briefly. Let me just find the right one. And the very first question on the MSD for FIMS would be, has top management documented an integrity policy statement which considers the strategic objectives of the organization? Now, it is a mouthful, but what is fortunate from the way that we've developed the FIMS and the MSDs is that to the left of the question, you will see the reference there in the third column, referencing 3.2, and that is referencing you to part 2 of the FIMS policy documents. And it's section 3, which says defining the firm's integrity management policies. So there's a whole section in how to deal with that. And essentially that flows from your code of conduct. And there is an example document available, and you can order your hard copy of the FIDI guidelines and then assist going forward. It sounds very daunting, but when you get into it and you use all the available resources that is made available throughout the MSD, you should be able to find your way through it. And you are more than welcome to contact me also if you require further assistance. Wally, I hope that answers the question, and then back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Philip. That was a good answer. The second question comes from Nati Mogane, who writes, the project sustainability, I imagine, is relatively new. Does the status of the less than 50%, the stats of the less than 50% MSD completed in 2022 from member firms include the PSM? And I think, I know it relates to Sonia's field, but she's got more questions. I'll ask Charles, because Charles, I know you've been looking at the stats and that.
Oh, thanks, Wally. Yes, so that stat did include members who had completed the sustainability MSD. But I'm just going to repeat what I said, that just because they've completed the MSD doesn't mean that they scored 100%. And in fact, one of the members that we verified only had a score of 40%. And when we discussed the various aspects that they had, they just said, you know, this is a new requirement, and we need to update our policies and procedures to include this. You know, we know that we're doing it on projects, but we haven't yet documented what we're doing. So for them it was useful because it identified somewhere where they could improve their systems.
Okay.
Wally, I just wanted to add something else onto Philip's answer from the first question.
Yes.
Is it absolutely necessary? We did have one question when developing these MSDs. What about a single person who's working for himself and filling out the MSDs, being a CESA member? You know, in that case, if it was just somebody working for themselves, they probably wouldn't have a integrity policy or a code of conduct, because it essentially would be him telling himself how he has to behave. So that doesn't quite make sense. You know, it's for that reason why we included that not applicable column in the MSDs, and in cases like that where you can really justify that you don't need to fill out this specific question, just mark it as not applicable and give your justification.
Thank you very much, Charles, and for answering the first question and adding that valuable bit of advice there. Thank you very much for clarification. The third question we have is directed to you, Sonia, and it's from Michael Riverola. It says, Sonia, what about companies that claim to be environmentally responsible but are involved in granting permits for oil and gas exploration, onshore fracking, and offshore seismic blasting? So I don't know if you'd like to tackle that for us. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the management system declaration, obviously we cannot vet what kind of projects companies pursue. And you can argue that, I mean, yes, oil and gas fracking is proven to be environmentally harmful, but so you might argue our roads, so you might argue our buildings, so you might argue is actually a lot of other things. I think where companies need to reflect very deeply about what kind of projects they go for is the potential stakeholder pushback, the potential repercussion in the public eye. We, for example, see, and if when it's in a public domain, everybody can Google it, but engineering companies that worked for Adani, which is a resources mining company, Indian-based in Australia. And there was a massive backlash by stakeholders, by the public, against engineering firms that engaged with that specific client. So the advice that I can give member firms, and I spoke about the different stages of our project sustainability assessment. When you do your initial risk assessment as part of, for example, your normal quality management process, then look at those categories as well. Look at, can this cause reputational damage to our company? Can this cause undue environmental harm? Does it have potentially also environmental benefits that we would be able to pursue in this? And this risk assessment is very important. Another important stage is then the planning stage, but by that time you're already committed to whatever project you have. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's a very eloquent answer. Thank you, Sonia. We've kind of run out of questions, but you know, it's not often you get a panel of this caliber together, and I thought just it's an opportunity for them, and I'm sure they're willing to do so, is to just give you the highlight of their presentation or their field, like the gem that they'd like you to take home. So if I can ask Diane to please present her gem, if she's willing to, of course. So it's over to you, Diane.
Thanks, Wally. Yeah, I'll present a gem. Well, I hope it's a gem. But what I just want to stress, especially to the young emerging firms, the new firms coming out, the new firms that are registering with CESA, really go about embracing the systems, embrace the MSDs, and really use them as guidance on how to implement systems. Because I think it gets very overwhelming when you're starting with nothing and you're sort of going, what do I need to put into place? So use the MSDs, use the FIDIC guidelines, have a look at the practice notes and use all of those to help you put your systems into place. And I think my real gem from a quality side is you have to be creative with your system. I think we've got stuck down in the old school way of doing things. Quality is seen as very paper driven. We have manuals and procedures. Be very creative in how you put your systems together. Use technology, use your smartphone, use the apps available, and try and make it as user-friendly, as easy as possible. And when you get that working and you get all the staff on board and buying into it, then you actually start developing a very effective system that your staff will embrace.
Thank you very much, Diane. That's lovely. Charles, can I ask you to present the next gem? But you could also maybe allude to why CESA sees these MSDs as of great importance.
Yeah, thanks. I think that was quite a major element of my presentation, which talked to the development of the MSDs and CESA identifying the need that they had to do more to get a feeling for where the members are. So the CESA's Code of Conduct speaks to members having these management systems in place. So it's from an assurance point of view that the members do have these systems in place, and CESA taking an active role to ensure that, but also to develop and help members where they see that they can develop their systems more.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's a great answer. I'm looking at two faces here. Philip, would you like to maybe stress something of importance from the integrity side of things?
Yes, thank you, Wally. Yeah, this is not part of my preparation, so I'm going to have to wing it. I think the importance of the MSDs is we as CESA try to give our member firms some guidelines on how to act with integrity. I think acting with integrity adds to the almost, let's say, the professionalism status that is bestowed upon us as a professional body. And that then goes a long way into helping our clients, government, public and private, and everybody just to see us as a profession with acting with integrity and some good values. And I would like to encourage everybody to become more like pigs with breakfast and not the chickens, because maybe if you've not thought about it, chickens are involved with breakfast, but the pigs are committed. So let's be committed to integrity and then see how we can change our professional view in the eyes of the public.
Thank you very much, Philip. I was wondering where you were going with that analogy, but it's very true. If you're committed, you're going to get eaten. The next person, and it will be our last question, is Sonia. Sonia, if you wouldn't mind sharing something that's close to your heart of importance, or like to stress.
Very gladly do. So my gem for you is, with the sustainability management and integrity management, etc., use your current processes. Don't see project sustainability management as yet another management system that you have to comply with and more red tape, because a lot of the things you will be doing already. You will be assessing your project before you submit a bid. You will be planning your projects when you get them. You will already have a verification and review projects for your deliverables. So use those processes that are already there, and at those points then ask, well, can we make this project more sustainable? Are there sustainability related risks that we need to mitigate? Are there low-hanging fruit that we can realize that we should speak to our clients about? Because then it won't be cumbersome, and then it will actually be help you to provide better service to your client and better service to the communities. And really, I'm always proud that I work in engineering, because yes, as I said earlier, engineering, they can do a lot of damage getting involved in projects that are harmful. But I think engineers can be real change makers through the work that we do. And I hope every morning when you get up, you feel very proud and you can say, today I can make a difference.
Geez, lovely words to end the presentation part of the webinar. Thank you very much. Just to say that we've reached the end of the webinar as such, and I'd like to thank the panelists greatly for availing of their time and for sharing their knowledge and thoughts with us. And of course, a big thank you to you, our delegates and members, for supporting CESA and attending our MSD webinar. Just before we close our session, we'd like to invite you to submit any comments or suggestions you may have regarding our webinars. It's become a regular feature in the life of CESA, with a view to improving them and making them more useful. You're also welcome to suggest topics that you'd like addressed at future webinars. Again, you can send them to me. It's wally@cesa.co.za. In fact, if you need contacts of the presenters or who have more questions, you're welcome to address it to me. So we also would like to ask you to complete the satisfaction survey that will pop up on your screen and the web link that will appear in the chat room. And the purpose of that survey is to provide us with your satisfaction ratings or feedback, and that will help us improve our future webinars. Delegates registered with EXA may claim 0.15 CPD points for attending this webinar, and that's as per our webinar attendance list. And for ease of administration, CPD certificates will be sent to delegates upon their completion of the survey. And again, I'd just like to thank you for your attendance and participation, and to wish you a good day further. So goodbye. Thank you.